All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be doing operations in scientific notation day 1. So actually we are starting with multiplying and dividing because it's actually easier than the addition and subtraction version. So I can multiply and divide scientific notation numbers. So we really just have a few examples here. Now what I want to remind you is for the final form of your answer, remember it has to be truly in scientific notation. And what that means again is the beginning number has to be between 1 and 9. Remember 9.999 it works. So if it's too small, like it starts with a 0 point something, or if it's too large, it's a 10 or a 15 point something, then you know you've got to do just a little bit more work to be able to complete it. All right, so starting it off, now you should have access to a calculator at home just to speed things up a little bit. So we really have 2 steps here for each problem. Our basic numbers at the front, kind of like a coefficient, if you will, numbers in front of an integer style. We're simply going to multiply those numbers. So we're talking about the 6.5 and the 8.7. So on your calculator, go ahead and multiply 6.5 by 8.7. We're going to write that down in just a moment, so keep that reserved on your calculator. Then what you're going to be doing is accessing your memories for your exponent rules. If you notice, we've got a 12th power and a negative 15th power. They've got the same base of 10, and instead of inside outside, they're kind of both inside the parentheses. So that means we're really going to go ahead and add those exponents. So I have a 12 plus a negative 15, so that should give me my new exponent. So I now have, after I did my multiplication, 56.55. That should be on your screen. And you should have a 10 to the negative 3rd power. Now, if you notice, the 56, that does not work for our 1 through 9 option. So that 56 is actually a little bit too large, so we need to move our decimal. Now, by moving it 1 space, that means my exponent has to change by 1 space. So the question that a lot of students have difficulty with is, well, is it going to become a negative 4 or is it going to become a negative 2? So my connection, I like to think about, well, that number's too big, so I'm going to take the bigger exponent. And you got to ask yourself, well, is a negative 4 or is a negative 2 a little bit bigger? Obviously, your negative 2 is. Some people would say, well, it's kind of like you're adding 1. So if you add 1, a negative 3 plus 1 also gives you an exponent of negative 2. So you've got 2 ways to think about it. The number's too big, so I'm going to take the bigger exponent, or I move it to the left, so I'm going to add it 1 because the number's bigger. I like my way, but that's okay. All right, let's try another quick multiplication one. So if you remember, on your calculator, just speed it up. We're going to go ahead and multiply our coefficients. Those are the numbers in the front. So 5 multiplied by 2.3. Go ahead and do that right now. Then I'm going to go ahead and look at my exponents with my base 10. I'm going to go ahead and add them. Advertisement. So we've got a negative 6 plus 12. And that should give us our new exponent. So if you notice, 11.5, again, is a little bit too big. We want it between 1 and 9, 1 and 9. So that means I can't stop here with a power or exponent of 6. So I need to change it one more again. So 11.5 is a little bit too big, so that means I'm going to have to move it 1 place, and I'm going to take the bigger exponent option. So if I'm going to move it 1 place, my 6 has to change either to a 5 or a 7. So since it's a bigger number, I'm going to take the bigger exponent, which is the 7th power. All right, so we've got our basic multiplication problems. Again, we are multiplying our coefficients, adding our exponents, but then on both of these examples, my final answer was not good. Now remember, if you do your multiplication and it gives you like a 6.2, then that's definitely okay because it wants to be between a 1 and 9, 1 and 9. All right, let's talk about our division now. Now, for our division problems, our coefficients, if you will, those numbers in the front, you're just going to go ahead and calculate them. You're going to divide them on your calculator. So this is your thinking on the calculator. And then after you do that, so let me give you a moment to type that in. After you do that, you're going to go ahead and, if you remember, we're going to subtract our exponents. Now, I'm not worried too much about where I do my subtraction, so the numerator or denominator. It's always just going to be the numerator for these problems. So that's why I write it as a 3 subtract 8. Because scientific notation is actually the only one or only form that you can have a negative exponent. All the other stuff that we practiced, we said negative exponents not allowed. All right, so if you did your calculator correctly, you get a 1.21, and then if you subtracted your exponents correctly, you get a negative 5. Now, if you notice your answer current form, 1.21, that is actually acceptable because that is between a 1 and 9 range. So that means I do not have to move my decimals. I do not have to change my exponent. This one is in the final answer form because, again, 1 through 9, 1 through 9. But on this last one here, I think we are going to have to fix it. So this is your thinking. Remember, I'm going to type this into my calculator. 1.305 divided by 1.45. And then after you do that, you're going to go ahead and write down 3 subtract, wait a minute, 3 subtract negative 4. We did this all the way back in August. It was one of the first things that we did in the year. Told you again, be careful with your negatives throughout the year. And if you remember, 3 subtract negative 4 is really like a 3 plus 4. So if you did your calculator correctly, you get a 0.9, and if you added your exponents, you got a 7th power. But if you notice, the current form for the answer is 0 point, and that is unacceptable. It has to be between a 1 and 9, 1 and 9. So that means we have to move our decimal place. Got to move it 1. That's going to give me a 9 or a 9.0. Now, we're moving at 1 space, so that means my 7 has to move 1 space, so it's going to become either a 6 or an 8. So the way I like to think about it again is, okay, if I have my number that's too small, because 0.9 is too small, then I got to take the small or smaller exponent, which is like subtracting 1. So we have 9 times 10 to the 6th power now. This is the better option. Because again, if you left it at a 0.9, it'd be incorrect. Now, one of the mistakes that some students make is they move the decimal, so they really write it as a 9, but they forget to change their exponents. That means they would keep it as a power of 7, which unfortunately is incorrect. All right, and there we go. We've got a really quick, short amount of notes again, some sample problems. It's either basic multiplication or division on your calculator. You're adding or subtracting your exponents. And then at the very end, be careful to see if your answer's in the correct form. All right, be awesome.